A quick shout out. The Las Vegas Aces obviously are going into game 5. So that's something that Caroline will be taking a look at because Indiana, man, absolutely just when you thought they were left for dead, you said it. You said that the Fever were going to have a good opportunity at home. They certainly did in game 4. They've now forced a game 5 that will come back to Vegas. This is going to be absolutely electric.
This back and forth has been so honestly, this entire, WNBA semifinals have been so fun and so back and forth and chippy. The thing with the Aces, whenever they took game 2 and really limited what Kelsey Mitchell was able to do, I said they now have the blueprint. Something that was so difficult for so many teams, whether it was in the regular season or in the postseason, to limit Kelsey Mitchell's impact. The Aces and that lights out defense found a way to do it. And I thought ultimately that would be the difference. Now, the Aces were able to take game 3, but in game 4, not only was Kelsey Mitchell able to get hers with 25 points, we also saw the added razzle dazzle with Aliyah Boston. We haven't seen Aliyah Boston be a massive impact, at least offensively, really throughout the entirety of this postseason. Yes, her presence has been, one that you have to pay attention to, but Aliyah Boston wasn't able to break through, at least on the box score, until she was last night. Aliyah Boston had 24 points. That's her largest point total going back to like mid-August. So not only is Kelsey Mitchell able to get hers, not only is Odyssey Sims able to get hers with 18 points last night, with the addition of Aliyah Boston, I mean, those three, having, double-digit scores, 2 of them in the 20s, that's not something that I think very many teams are able to do against that Aces defense. The Aces have the best defense in the WNBA, including A'ja Wilson, the co-defensive player of the year. So the Fever, I want to keep counting them out because they're not at full strength, because the Fever don't have Caitlin Clark or Sophie Cunningham or Ari McDonald or Sydney Colson, and yet they still find ways to win. No longer are they a good story. They haven't been just a good story for quite some time now. Now, the Fever look like legitimate contenders, and forcing a game 5 against that Aces squad when A'ja Wilson is able to drop 30 plus. I mean, I have to give so much credit to Stephanie White, their head coach, and to this entire team. They continue to find ways to win, even when they're
They'll also
shorthanded.
everybody will be waiting to see how that plays out. There was some controversy in that. I will say that ties into our other game as well. Controversy as the Vegas Aces went to the podium afterwards and asked a lot about the free throw disparity. They were outshot at the free throw line 34-11 in that game. So, and in fact, A'ja Wilson said a couple of times that there were special whistles. So there's going to be fines coming for the way that Becky Hammon and A'ja Wilson talked about the officiating. And I think a message was sent about how they want the game to be called in game 5. But that's not the only issue that happened over the weekend with WNBA and officiating, because the Minnesota Lynx have now been eliminated. They've been completely eliminated. Congratulations. Phoenix takes them down. They are headed to the WNBA finals, which is great. It's a great story. But in the process, it's impossible to talk about that and not talk about the fact that they went into the last game of this series without their best player and without their head coach. Their best player, Nafisa Collier, was injured on a play that the coach felt should have been a foul, and Cheryl Reeve was so adamant about it that she was ejected from the game. Afterwards, she went to the mic and she made her opinion on the officiating very clear, to the point that she was then suspended for a game for asking how the league could possibly put these crews on these games. We are seeing huge coaches in the WNBA come out and speak loudly, Caroline, about the fact that there is an issue with the game, the way these games are being called. And at some point, that's going to have to be acknowledged. We are seeing a rash of injuries across the sport. We are seeing absolute, whether you want to call it physicality, whatever it is, there is some level of A, inconsistency with the way the games are being called. B, there's a level of physicality that's resulting in injury everywhere. And C, you've got legendary big brand head coaches speaking out on it day in and day out. The WNBA has an issue at this point.
We heard Becky Hammon speak a lot about her issues with the officiating. Becky Hammon, head coach of the Las Vegas Aces, she talked about how a lot of the coaches on her coaching staff come from the NBA and how they have said this stuff would never fly in the NBA. Becky Hammon said, if I did, in the street, what they're doing to each other on the court, I would get arrested. And we also heard Cheryl Reeve, the head coach of the Minnesota Lynx, call for a change in leadership in WNBA officiating. And look, I understand that sometimes coaches can speak to the referees and speak to the league through the media to try and get some tactical advantages. I think that that is in play here, but I also think that it is just a very fair call to action. That Nafisa Collier didn't shoot a single free throw in game 3. How is Nafisa Collier, who has the ball as much as she has it, not getting fouled once in an incredibly physical game? Now, look, the postseason in any sport, the physicality gets ratcheted up a little bit. We see it in hockey, we see it in football, we see it in basketball as well. I think it's a fair expectation that maybe, just maybe, the refs swallow their whistle just a little bit more in the postseason. But it does feel like the WNBA refs have been swallowing their whistle just a little bit too much. And now we're seeing Nafisa Collier, who had MVP buzz all season long. She was an MVP caliber player, one of the best players in the league, out in a critical game 4 because she got injured. Now we're seeing, some of the best star players across the league get injured because of just the roughness and the physicality that we're seeing on the court. So can you say that the coaches are just boohoo crying and whining about officiating? Yeah, maybe so. And I'll be the first person to say, okay, hush up, stop your whining, wipe your tears, and go out there and win basketball games. But I do think what these coaches are saying is incredibly valid, not just because of what we've seen in the postseason, but this has been an issue in the W all season long and over the last couple of years. You have to protect your players.
As you see on the graphic there, you've got 2 other coaches that had no skin in the outcome of this game agreeing with the comments being made by Reeve. You've got 2 prominent coaches that are still playing right now, are still coaching right now, making these statements. I think that there's substance to that. I think that matters, right? Like, there is a moment where certainly when coaches tussle afterwards or when coaches say things, it's easy for another coach to say, I'm going to stay as politically correct on this and stay away from it. We didn't see Becky Hammon do that, right? So I do think that there's weight to this when you've got, Stephanie White coming out and saying, I think that she made a lot of valid points. I think that at some point there has to be some accountability. Those are strong words about what has obviously become an issue. And you can see it and feel it down the stretch of these games. Like just the inconsistency within the game of how it's being called at times. And then when you just see the last 3-4 minutes and it becomes the worst of the worst with where they're blowing the whistles and where they aren't, that Nafisa Collier moment was so damning, not just because of the turnover, but because it cost that team an opportunity. For the second straight year, Minnesota Lynx fans feel like they have been robbed in the playoffs because of officiating. I don't think, and the NBA has done such a good job for so many years with the 2-minute report and coming out and being transparent about these things. It's hard not to look at the W and say, hey, give us the info. Like, how did we get here? Who are these officials? How did we make these decisions? And what are you doing to make sure that these officials are doing the best possible job? Because it feels out of control. Like that moment you see right there was an entire staff holding back a well-respected coach that looked like she was about to lose her mind and just go after the ref. Like, it's a bad look for the league. It's a bad look for the sport. It's a bad look for the game. We're not talking about the games as much as we're talking about the officiating. That's a problem for the W, Caroline.
And unfortunately, that's nothing new. We have been talking about the refs more than we've been talking about the games really for a while now. You just mentioned it. The Lynx feel like they got totally robbed in the WNBA finals because of officiating. And I sometimes I think, officiating and ref talk gets way, way, way overblown. That sometimes it comes at the hands of just a salty fan base that wants to blame the referees more than blaming their own team or their own coach or their own star players. But in the WA, I think that it is an officiating problem. It is a refereeing problem. Cheryl Reeve is the winningest head coach in WNBA history. Cheryl Reeve has been around for a very long time and has won a whole lot of basketball games. I give Cheryl Reeve a whole lot of credit for sticking up for the league, not just sticking up for her team and her star player, Nafisa Collier, but sticking up for the players in this league. Cheryl Reeve knew what was going to happen when she called for a change in leadership. She knew it would be a fine, and she probably knew that it would warrant a suspension in the postseason. And she did it anyways. I think Cheryl Reeve looked at it and said, well, one, I don't know how far my team can go and how many games my team can win without Nafisa Collier. Now they were able to prove they were able to win games without Nafisa Collier in the regular season. But Cheryl Reeve may have looked at it and said, look, I am willing to face a suspension if it means critical change will happen in this league. And I give Cheryl Reeve a whole lot of credit for it.